Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock. We'll begin the Licensing Regulatory Committee. Can I ask for apologies for absence, please? Do we have any? I've had one provisional from Councillor Dimmock. She may not be able to make it. Can we take declarations of interest, please? Are there any? Okay, none. Item 3, can we confirm and sign the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th of May, 2022? Somebody move those as accurate? Councillor Strong, seconder? You have a seconder?
Councillor Webb online,
right.
Chair. Councillor Webb.
Okay, right. Yeah, right. Righto, I'll open the meeting, over the rest of the meeting now to Licensing and Regulatory Committee officers and the taxi and private hire policy, a report which you've had on your agenda pack. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the reason why this report has been brought here today, it's a follow-up report really and changes to our taxi policy. It's after the recommendations of the Department of Transport and also Welsh Assembly as well with regards to the proposed changes. In the Licensing and Regulatory Committee on the 23rd of February 2021 and 18th of May 2021, members were made aware of the Department of Transport recommendations, and the link was passed on that, and it's also a link on this report today. What that means is that even though Welsh Government are actually devolved to Welsh Government taxi licensing, the Department of Transport still have effect for the responsibility of taxis in Wales until a bill is actually passed, a white paper is passed, where then it will be devolved entirely to Welsh Government. So that's in 3.2 of the report, explaining the reasons why we brought this today. What they are trying to do, the main achievement is to tighten up on a lot of aspects with taxi licensing. The Department of Transport agreed that they would allow Welsh Government really to do the changes bit by bit, even though they are responsible for Wales as it currently stands, because they are working towards the same sort of document really in effect. So the summary of the changes that they want is in 3.6 of this report, and a lot of stuff that we did from 1st of October 2021 change the DBS recommendations, and a lot of the stuff in our current policy are actually part of the recommendations which are on here as well. So this report really is actually to put it in line with a template, as it mentioned in 3.8 of this report. The Welsh Government submitted a template they would like all authorities to sort of adopt. So we've changed the layout of our policy. We've actually put it in the template recommendations that they have, which is what's attached to this report today. We've included the CCTV, which we did have some conditions in it, but they've enlarged on it in vehicles as well. And we've already adopted, as I mentioned, from 1st of October, we've done the phase of upping the amount of checks we do on disclosure and bar in service checks. What you used to previously have was that we would be every 3 years, we would do a check on a driver when it was due for renewal. That has changed as every 6 months that checks are being done. And similarly, vehicles used to fall through the loophole where vehicle proprietors didn't have to have a DBS check, they now do. And also operators have a DBS check as well, be it a basic disclosure for operators. And I think the operators was brought in just to give you a feel because it felt that they were the best people who would know when a house is empty, basically. You know, if they're taking a booking, taking somebody to a holiday airport, you know, they'll know that house is empty for a fortnight. So obviously that's one of the reasons why they brought it in there. So it's a number of factors. So the crux of this report is to change the template layout, to then consult with the trade as to the layout and any other proposals that's in there, and it will be a view to, as this is progressing to a bill and ultimately an act, that they will have tweaks on that template, and that will be brought back to this committee as and when it's required, with the ultimate aim that the whole of Wales will have an almost generic sort of policy, basically, which was one of the things raised this morning, really, wasn't it, on that. So I've no doubt they'll have other sort of measures that will be coming our way. So this report is to do it as it currently stands, the proposals from Department of Transport and Welsh Government. So the recommendation is that members note the content of the report and the need to review our existing requirements, policies and conditions of licence in order to comply with statutory standards and Welsh Government guidance. And in 2.2 of the recommendation, to approve the consultation process with the licensed trade on the proposed changes during the period of 14th of November to 30th of December 2022, and agree to further report being submitted to the Licensing Regulatory Committee following that consultation on the 31st of January 2023 to consider any recommendations that the trade themselves would like in it. Okay, before you actually make a decision on that, Chair, can I pass you over to Dave with regards to this policy and some news on this?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Linda. It is pertinent to the report, is to advise that Lee Beach here, to my right, will be joining Welsh Government on a 12-month secondment, looking specifically at national taxi licensing. So I think that's really helpful. So we're really well placed. As Linda says, this will be a policy that evolves as things change over time. So Lee will, sadly in some ways, but good for him in other ways, be leaving us for 12 months. So he's with us till Friday. So if you've got any issues in Abergavenny, do it this week. We won't be seen for 12 months. We will backfill that post, clearly. But just to make the point that Lee will be joining Welsh Government specifically on taxi conditions, etc. So we'll be in a good place at Monmouthshire to benefit from that secondment. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Right, right, members. There are two background papers to this report, which I know are very long. Are there any questions from members taking this forward to the officers, please? Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Watts, I can see your hand, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the Hackney Carriages private vehicles in the list there, it says, so under, you see the kind of application process prior to fitness, so on and so on. Overseas criminal check. Can the officers explain to me how that's done now if we don't effectively have a direct link then with the European Union data files?
Yeah, so it depends where the applicant is obviously previous place of abode and where they resided before. It would depend on the country, but we have guidance and we've got information from the Home Office which assists, and it's basically for them to go to the embassy usually and obtain. There's two formats. One is a certificate of good conduct, and the other I can't remember off the top of my head. Can you remember what the other one is?
I'm trying to think of the wording of it. Is actually where they go and get a recommendation from the embassy, basically, to allow this person to drive. You know, so it would look at that element, really, you know, if they've been longer out of the country, more than 6 months. So because what used to happen before is that you'd have like X amount of years that they would have the DBS check where they resided, but it strengthened it by saying if they were out of the country for 6 months, again, they would have to have that element of going to the embassy to see if anything has happened in that 6 months duration. So it's tightening up. It's actually, the guidance is fully explained on how it works, actually on the Disclosure and Barring Service site as well.
Chair, can I ask then as a supplementary, when they go and when they have to apply to the embassies, there's going to be a cost implication to them for that. Do you know what that is?
We wouldn't get involved in the cost of the Disclosure and Barring Service. That is a matter for them with regards to the costs and how the checks are made.
So could I suggest then that and it's only, I appreciate this is the legislation, but could I suggest then that there is an element of, financial kind of discrimination depending on whatever kind of former European country they, so for example, whether it was Slovakian or Czech or it could be Spain. What we're saying is we don't actually know what the cost implication is, and it could run into hundreds of pounds really. I mean, I don't see any information in this pack about that, and that worries me that they are being marginalised, in that line of work.
Yeah, because it's a duty with the disclosure and barring service rather than with ourselves. So it's their criteria with regards to enhanced checks and the nature of the post itself that they would require that. So whether they got any recompense that they can have with the disclosure and barring service if they are unable to financially fund it, I think that would be a matter for the DBS service itself, really.
Right. But I mean, look. Effectively, if this, it's a technical argument. But if we didn't agree that was the right way forward, what would be the outcome?
If you didn't agree that was the right way forward, you put the authority at risk that you haven't done the adequate checks, really, of that person. And that would something, if something happened, heaven forbid, they say, well, why didn't you insist that they had the correct DBS check?
No, but so I think you'll misunderstand what I'm saying with greatest respect. So whilst I appreciate that they do need that what we're asking them effectively is to go and spend possibly hundreds of pounds on getting that check. And if we wanted to articulate that, so, I wouldn't support it based on that I think it's marginally discriminatory. And that's a technical point. So I couldn't support it based on that alone. If you're saying, well, that's not what's in the consideration, and I don't want to be difficult about it, but I think there is an element of discrimination built into this legislation because no one's bothered to do the homework to see what the cost implication is.
Yeah, that is, like I said, with the DBS service itself, the public body there, is not something that we've insisted on. In fact, the changes to the 6 monthly checks as well.
6 months, yeah.
Yeah, the 6 monthly check is done by a what's it called, like a sign-up service. So they're not actually financially worse off by doing the 6 months. There's actually more work ourselves by going in and seeing if anything has changed since the last 6 months, because they're doing the sign-up service with the DBS. So there's no implications there. They're not financially burdened there, but it just means that we have those adequate checks more often to ensure that that person is the right person to continue to drive. Like I said, with regards to if they had to go to the embassy and if they've been overseas for some time, that is something that's insisted by the DBS service and not something that is Monmouthshire led.
Right. So we you're saying to me that we're not in an illegal position to note that or to protest about that or to have that better explained to us.
The only thing that we could do is if we ignored the recommendation of the Department of Transport and not do any DBS check, which would be highly risky given the nature of the work that's involved.
So we have to agree to potential discrimination, otherwise we just let effectively. It's a bit of a difficult one, isn't it? Because I don't want to waste everybody's time here, but I absolutely don't want to endorse a policy where we don't do any checks at all, because that would be, that would be simply wrong in every way. But equally, to marginalise people simply because they've got a European passport or under settled status, because then they incur the cost, I think it's fundamentally wrong, Chair.
I think it would only be the check would be overseas check if that person hasn't resided in Britain or for a length of time, or they've been out of the country for 6 months.
Okay, what is that length of time?
I think it's 4 years, is it? 4 years? That's 4 years details, DBS?
It's from the age of 10 upwards, I know that. So if they lived in another country from the age of 10, they would be required to contact their embassy and obtain that certificate of good conduct. Or otherwise,
I couldn't agree to that, Chair. I'm sorry.
The flip side to that would be, though, that if we said that we weren't going to request that information, but we were going to request it for all UK-based citizens, and is that discriminatory against those?
What? Sorry, I don't understand what you mean. I'm saying, so I'm not saying that we should discriminate against anybody. I'm simply saying that I think that obviously doing a check is an appropriate measure. It's necessary. But what I'm trying to simply say is that effectively the cost incurred is discriminatory simply because they hold a European, and this is obviously an oversight as far as settled status is concerned, and that concerns me. That's my point. I couldn't agree to it. I've got personal reasons. I've got wider political reasons why I couldn't agree with it. I do think it's discriminatory.
Could this be followed up from the officers to elucidate more for Councillor Watts? Because
I could have a look at what is actually on the DBS service site, because obviously, they may have an element there, because obviously it's done by them rather than us, what is the requirement. So obviously until I inquire with the DBS service, they may well have an element there where people can get funding to carry out those checks. I couldn't comment on that because it's not something that we would be involved in, so.
I appreciate that, Chair, but through you, Chair, and I don't want to waste anybody's time, is that until we know that, I couldn't possibly agree that, because it is, in my view, discriminatory.
I think what the point was, Lee was trying to make out, is that if you say, well, we don't need to do it on this person because they're unable to do it because of the financial implications, how would that leave us on those who have to do the checks?
I didn't say that. That's very unfair.
Yeah, I think that's what's the point that was trying to be made.
Through you, that's wrong. I simply said that it was a cost implication because they had, say, for example, European settled status.
Yeah, and that we'll look
nothing
into
to do with British citizenship.
No,
so that's misleading.
No, I think it was trying to say, what if we put a policy in place rather than if they are British citizens or European citizens, is how would we deal with it in the policy as a whole for all parties? And it wasn't saying that we should or shouldn't do it for whatever status they are. It's saying that is the criteria of the policy to ensure that we got the checks.
It's got to be about equality, Chair. Sorry, I don't want to, but I'm not agreeing.
But I can certainly look. I can certainly, Councillor Walsh, I can certainly look at the DBS service and see if they offer any sort of recompense. If somebody's unable to actually carry out a check with the government that they have to go to get their recommendation, so I can certainly see how it works there and how they, give any benefits to those who are unable to do it. I can certainly look into that for you.
Could I recommend then, Chair, that we defer that until we do know?
I don't think we do that, Armand. Perhaps we should.
Chair, perhaps if I could offer a thought. The first thing is, what's the differential? We may be talking about £10, I don't know. The differential between, as you say, the EU worker to the UK worker is your point, I think. But what I suggested, rather than hold things up, we could check that out during the consultation period, couldn't we? We're not asking for members of this committee to agree this taxi and private hire policy and conditions today. It's to go to consultation. So during the consultation period, we could ask that question, can we? What is the cost differentiation?
Yeah, that seems reasonable, Chair. But the fact is, it should be at least noted that we've highlighted this, so we can make some further representation.
Well, that will be noted. I think we ought to draw this particular conversation to a close. We're going to get anywhere otherwise. But following on what Armand has said and what David Jones has said, perhaps it can be considered in the consultation period, and more information gleaned in the meantime to assist Armand's concerns.
Thank you.
Councillor Jane Lucas.
Afternoon, Chair. Thank you. And really, it's just highlighting again what I said earlier on in the training this morning. It was interesting to hear that Liam, I think as you said, Liam was going to Cardiff to be working on this for 12 months. Very interesting, and I can only again please ask that this information and experience that I've gathered from the front line, as it were, that drivers are really tested for their ability and safety on the road. So, for example, it says hold a UK driving licence for 12 months. Well, yes, that's fine, but I want to know if they're safe, and there's a big difference. And as I know from people that come back to test to be retested, they have lost and forgotten a lot of the information they would have gained initially when learning to drive. And it might be simple things, but these are very important, and I feel that safety's sake, it needs to be raised. As they said in the training, do you trust this person to actually carry your nearest and dearest? And for that reason, I would like to know that that person has passed a second driving test purposely designed for taxi drivers, as it used to be, please. Just wondering if it could be added to the notes and taken forward in some way and represented. That was all. Happy to help in any which way if any further information is required.
Can that be considered in the consultation period as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Lucas. And as I say, because Lee's joining Welsh Government imminently, certainly that is a factor, which is what you suggested, I believe, isn't it? So certainly we can take that forward. It'll be noted through this committee, and then Lee can take that forward in his role in Welsh Government.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry, I should have said Lee and not Liam.
Yeah, no,
I apologise.
Okay, thank you. I got Councillor Strong on without the hand up. Carry on.
Okay, I can't seem to get into Teams, so apologies. Page 90 of the document talks about cross-border enforcement, and I accept that this is looking at sort of consistency across Wales, but given that Monmouthshire has borders with, you know, lots of English counties, how does it fit in with obviously regulations that are different in those other council areas?
It stemmed from the Department of Transport, which is England and Wales anyway. The Welsh element of it is because it's devolved to Wales, so they are looking to sort of do it throughout Wales, but they are following what is in the Department of Transport really as well, so it's not going to be the changes there. And I think the cross-border element is that there was always a difficulty if you were an authorised officer, say in Monmouthshire, and then you needed to take legal action because of something that's happened just across the border. And I think it's having that joint working element within your policy. It didn't prevent you having joint working with across the border into England, you know, because they are going to be following the same sort of pattern. It's just the fact that it's been devolved to Wales, so they're trying to do it in line with the Department of Transport as well. Okay.
Armand, is that a legacy hand, Armand?
I'm sorry, Chair.
Radio. I don't see any more hands up. Any more from the floor? Can we then go back to the recommendations and decide how we're going to go? The recommendations 2.1, 2.2. The members note the content of the report and the need to review our existing requirements, policies and conditions of licence in order to comply with the statutory standards of the Welsh Government. And 2.2, to approve the consultation process with the licensed trade on the proposed changes during the period of 14th November this year to the 30th of December this year, and agree to a further report being submitted to the Licensing and Regulatory Committee on the 31st of January next year for consideration. And I note that within that, there are two topics taken forward, one from Councillor Lucas and one from Councillor Watts. And on that basis, could I ask that we make a decision on this? Is there, is it, my chat bar? Oh. Well, go on, take a vote while I sign back in. I've lost my screen.
I can't get in.
Yeah, I got the same problem. I'm back in now, I think. No? Yes, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it now.
I've got a previous training, but not this meeting.
Okay. Right. What was the vote, Wendy? Okay. see the 8 votes. Any good? Okay. In the absence of Councillor Strong not being able to vote, there are 8 votes for and 2 votes abstaining from the decision. I haven't included Jackie, no. Okay, well, in the absence of a vote on the computer, it'll be 9 for and 2 abstentions. Thank you. That brings us to the end of this meeting, other than to say the next meeting will be on December the 13th. Am I correct? I think it's December the 13th. Yeah.
It might be one on December 13th, I'm not sure, to be honest.
Sorry?
I'm not sure if there's one on December the 13th, January, it's the 1st of January.
That's the next scheduled one, wouldn't it? But make that one. Okay. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. Thank you. Simon, sorry. Your hand was up, Simon. I didn't see it.
You're on mute, Simon. It's on mute.
Are we still in the meeting?
May I ask, Chair? I haven't had an answer, really. I did question today's meeting in the afternoon. When did we decide to do afternoons meetings? The only thing is, I'll say this on the basis of is, I use Teams for my diary.